everyone, and hi Dominique. Thank you so much for joining me as we take a look at patient perspectives and take a look at how genomics is impacting patient lives. But before we begin, Dominique, if you could just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself as well.
Hello, my name is Dominique Goodson. I am a professional patient advocate. I'm from the United States. I work for the Sickle Cell Community Consortium. I am their senior project manager, and I'm also the Dean of Warrior University. I also have an online platform that I created and run called SCDForum, where we give out information about all about sickle cell, different things, just making sure we provide information for all the warriors and caregivers out there.
For those who don't know, would you be able to just give a little bit of a background about sickle cell disease itself?
Sure. Okay. So sickle cell disease is an inherited blood disorder. In order for someone to have sickle cell, both parents have to have either sickle cell trait or another one that mixes with, such as beta thalassemia. And even then, there is a 25% chance of having actual sickle cell disease. And it's sickle cell, it's when your blood is shaped like a sickle instead of the regular blood cells where it's a donut with the hole still in the middle. And it causes it's a number of symptoms. It causes extreme. It could cause pain, infections. It could cause strokes, a number of things. But one thing I always tell people is that even if two people have the same type of sickle cell, no two people have the same symptoms of sickle cell. They're different. Sickle cell patients are like snowflakes. No two are alike.
So when were you kind of first diagnosed with sickle cell disease, and what was that kind of journey like to get a diagnosis?
So I was 5 when I was diagnosed with sickle cell. I was out playing in the snow with my foster sisters at the time, and I used to always beat my legs because they were hurt, and we didn't know why. So in the United States, we have the newborn screening, and one of the tests that they screen for is for sickle cell disease. I wasn't born, I live in New Jersey. We didn't get our law passed for the newborn screening where sickle cell was added until 1990. So I found out by physically having a crisis attack. Played in the snow way too long, ended up not being able to walk because my legs were so heavy and was having a crisis attack. Went to the hospital, and lucky for me, it was an ER doctor that was on duty that night that noticed the symptoms and told them, was like, okay, to run the test to see that I might possibly have sickle cell. And then that's how we found out was that I had sickle cell.
So what were kind of your like first memories of kind of finding out that you had it? Because obviously I feel like with sickle cell disease, like, you know, it's not like neurological or anything like that. So you're kind of aware that you have this condition. Like, how did you kind of, obviously being a young child, you were like 5, how did you kind of, when were your like first memories of knowing, oh, actually I have a condition, and how did you kind of learn about that as well? Like, how did you teach yourself to kind of understand the disease?
So for me, it was when I was 5 and the doctor coming in saying, you have sickle cell, and explaining what it is. And so some of my family members in past generations had sickle cell. So like my aunt knew about it. We searched for doctors because they were like, you have to find an hematologist. I remember going to different doctors and all the doctors saying, oh, she's not going to make it to 13, or she's not going to make it to 18. And my aunt's like, yeah, we don't want you as our hematologist. And she just kept telling me, just because they say you have it doesn't mean it has you. And don't listen to them on how they say how long your life is. That's up to you and God. No one knows how long you're going to live. And then I remember her saying we have to find a doctor that's not going to give us the year that you're not going to make it to, but say, hey, this is the plan of what we're going to do. And the doctor that I got, we finally, after like the 4th doctor, was like, oh, she can make it through. She could do all this. She could go to school, everything. This is what we're going to do. And I remember he gave me this huge medical packet about sickle cell. It was like a book. He made it into a book. and he gave it to me. And I remember my aunt making sure that I read it, and I read it from back to front. And no, at the time I was only 5 years old. It took me quite a while, but like the medical words that I didn't know, I will look it up on in the dictionary. Um, just reading what I could and couldn't do, and what things were going to be like for me, is my like true first memory of like, oh snap, like this is a horrible disease. I'm going to have a hard a hard life. So that's one of the first memories of me realizing, like, okay, things are different now. I'm no longer like my siblings. I'm, in a way, I want to say kind of a freak, but not really a freak. But yeah, I was about 6 years old when I finished reading it, and just was like, wow,
Did
things are
that
going to
kind of
change.
did that make you kind of want to then kind of like research around that like a bit more and really kind of take an interest like in this disease and learn more about it and like always keep up to date? Or you just kind of like, oh no, I don't want to read
Oh
about it. I'm
God,
just
no.
gonna
I was 5. I was 6 years old. I'm trying to figure out why I can't go outside and play with my siblings. But no, at that time it didn't. The only thing that I focused on more was learning my condition, learning my limits. Because my aunt will always tell me, she's like, yes, the doctor says you can't do X, Y, and Z, and you can't do this, and you know that your condition is based on the weather. You can't get too cold, you can't get too hot, and all this. But you also need to know your limits. If you want to go outside and play with your siblings in the snow, you need to test that limits. So you know that go out for 20 minutes and see, then come in. So for me at that time, it was more, well, it was kind of like a research capacity in a way, but it was learning my limits and learning my condition through me, because I didn't know any sickle cell patients growing up at all. I think I met, the only ones that I did meet were like at the camp that I went to, and none of them was in the area I was in. And it was just this one girl that she didn't like me too much, because I was I'm like, I would be outside playing in the snow with everyone during free time, and she's in the doorway looking like, don't you have sickle cell? I've seen you in the hospital. You're not supposed to be out there. I was like, says who? I'm like, I'm gonna come in. I got 5 more minutes, so I'm about to enjoy my time. Yeah, her mother got upset. I remember because I was like in 5th grade. Her mother got upset with what I told her daughter. I said, you could do whatever you want, just know your limits. And her daughter apparently got sick behind going outside playing in the cold. And she told her mom what I told her. And so the mom came to school and told the principal, and then they called my aunt in. And like, it was this huge thing. I was like, I apologize. I didn't mean it that way. I was just telling her that she could do whatever she wants, just know your limits. Like, that's what my aunt tells me. She's like, well,
yeah.
don't tell my daughter she could play in the snow no more. She ended up in the hospital for weeks. I was like, I'm sorry. Yeah, it was crazy. But I spent that time learning my condition based on me, because I wasn't around other warriors. It wasn't like I could speak to other people and ask questions. And granted, I read the book and I always went back to the book for information, but there's nothing like learning firsthand.
How did you kind of like, as you said, like you didn't really know anyone at the time who had it, and like you were trying to learn yourself kind of your limits. How did you kind of deal with that, like at school, like going into school, trying to explain this condition to people, trying to explain to like teachers and things, trying to say like these are my limits kind of thing? What was it like that experience, trying to kind of deal with that and trying to explain to people who don't really know anything about it?
So thankfully for me, my aunt is, she is amazing. I give her credit for all of it, for the way she raised me. She told me that I must speak up for myself, and that I have to I have to make sure that I maintain my grades, get A's and B's, because there are going to be times where I'm hospitalized and I can't be in school. And she doesn't want my condition to hinder me from completing school or anything. But she also told me to make sure that I fight for myself, whether it's with doctors or teachers or for anything. So for me, it was up until I think I was about 8th grade, my aunt would come in first day of school, explain to the principal, explain to the teachers, and she would also make sure I was there and make me speak as well. Because she always said there are going to be times where I can't be there with you. So you're going to need to know what to say. So she made sure she explained to them what sickle cell was, that they had any questions, they could call either my hematologist or my pediatrician, either one to ask me questions, or that I will be able to answer questions, or she would be able to answer questions. She made sure that those questions were answered and I knew about it. So once I got to high school, she told me, okay, now you're in high school. You're getting ready you got 4 years before you go to college, if that's your decision. Now you need to learn how to do it for yourself. I've been doing it for you for this amount of time. You know what to say, you know what to do. Now it's time for you to do it. You have to learn to speak for yourself, and you're going to need to learn to take care of yourself, because I won't always be here. So I would just go in the first day of class. And in high school, it's like the first taste you get where you switch classes and everything. And I would tell the teachers, like, look, I have sickle cell disease. Most of them had probably never heard of it. I would explain what it was, that I get dehydrated, that I can't do X, Y, and Z too tough, that if I get cold, I just need to make sure, but that the nurses have the medication that I need. They have everything that I need in their office, because I always go to the nurse's office as well, drop off my pain medicine or any other type of medicine that I was taking to them. So if I had a crisis attack in school, I could just go to the nurse's office. So I did that with all the teachers, and by the time I was sophomore, most of the teachers knew me. So it was like I didn't have to really, I was an active kid in high school, extremely active. So most of the teachers knew me. So it wasn't really letting them know, but still letting them know. And the nurses knew me too. So it really wasn't that, but that taught me what to do and prepared me for college, because going to college, I had to do the same thing. At the time, I didn't know that they had the like disability plan for college. I didn't know that. So I went to like every teacher and explained to them might not be in class sometimes. I might do, but I will always turn in my work. Some professors like, well, I don't care. It's not like you have cancer. And I'm like, well, I won't be back in your class, and I am reporting you to your dean. So, but that is how I dealt with it, with explaining. But that has a lot to do with my aunt. She was amazing in making sure I prepared for what life was going to be like.
Yeah, because there are some rare diseases like sickle cell disease, and like my cousins have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, where it's like it's not something that's physical, like it's not something that's kind of on the surface. Obviously, as you said, you get like crisis attacks and stuff like that, but it's something where like if someone just saw you, they'd be like, oh well, there's nothing wrong with you. And I feel like sometimes it's really hard for rare disease patients, because they have to try and, like as you said, you have to kind of like fight for yourself. You have to fight, like kind of fight everyone just to kind of for people to kind of listen to you. Did you find that you had that kind of support from teachers, and that they were kind of concerned and kind of wanted to like make sure that you were okay and try to like accommodate where they could and stuff like that?
Most of my teachers, yes, was extremely accommodating. Some pushed me further than others. Like, I think you could do more. You're being lazy. Like, my godmother was my fourth grade teacher. So that's interesting enough. So some did, and then there was others, like when I got to college, that I wouldn't even take their class if they weren't supportive. Like, I literally had one professor. I went up to the front, to him, and was like, I have sickle cell. I had like all the notes. I had the notes from my doctor and everything. I had the chancellor of the school backing me. I was like, here's her number. You could call her. She like knows everything. And he was like, well, if you miss 3 days in my class, you fail, period. That's the rule. It's not like you have cancer or anything. And I just remember thinking, I was like, that is awful to say, just awful. And it's hard because we do have it is essentially an invisible disease, because I had one professor say, well, you don't look sick, but what does a person who's sick look like? So it's difficult, but what I did was, it's like, well, they're ignorant, they don't understand, and it's not their fault. They probably never came across a person with sickle cell, but you know what? I ain't got to take your class. Now in high school it was something a little different, but all my high school teachers, supported me. So
Yeah. I mean, what kind of like treatments like have you kind of had to like take throughout the years? Because I know there's kind of like new ones that are kind of emerging that are more experimental, but what is the kind of standard treatment that you've had to take to kind of help with your symptoms?
So my standard treatment that I took was, when we found out, was antibiotics at first. So antibiotics, then folic acid, and then it's the pain medicine for when you're in pain. Um, I know most people stay on antibiotics until they're like 5, if I'm not mistaken, but I was 5 when we found out. And so my hematologist put me on antibiotics. Um, I think when I turned around 11 or 12, he was like, okay, you're old enough now. We're going to take you off the antibiotics. And I want to say it was like 2 months after that, I ended up with like double pneumonia, was in ICU. My aunt went back to him and was like, no, 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 we're putting her back on antibiotics. And I actually stayed on antibiotics until I was 18. Because every time they tried to take me off of it, I would have like this, I would have just an extremely bad crisis attack that was too close of a call, that was for my aunt's liking. So I was on antibiotics till I was 18, and then it was just folic acid. Um, I didn't start hydroxyurea or take hydroxyurea. I didn't even know about hydroxyurea until I was in college. And that was, I want to say like I was around maybe 19, 20. I started kind of regressing back to when I first found out that I had that I had sickle cell, where I was having crisis attack every 2 weeks. No one explained to me that once you hit an adult as a sickle cell patient, your crisis attacks start to go kind of revert when you first had it, and you get more and more crisis attack because of stress from family, boyfriend, school, just adult life stuff. I didn't know that, and so my doctor was like, "Let's try hydroxyurea." So I was on that for a couple of years before I told them I didn't want to do that anymore, because it did seem like it was working. And then I went back on hydroxyurea and had to go off for just a crazy reason. But those was the only things that I took growing up. I didn't know that I could have got blood exchange fusions while I was in college to help with the crisis attacks. I didn't know that while I was in college. That would have probably helped a lot, and would have lessened my crisis attacks. But those were the widely known ones that I know about and what I took.
How do you kind of now manage the condition? Like, because obviously you said that that's from like kind of when you were like in college and stuff. Like, how do you now, like knowing, kind of having that kind of wider community and speaking to other people, how do you sort of manage your symptoms now, both kind of like mentally, but also the kind of physical symptoms as well?
So mentally, that took me, still taking me. It took me a while to realize. I do a lot of writing, and I kept a journal. It took me a while to realize what my triggers were. Um, Trying to be a normal college student and do normal things when your normal is different from other normals, where you aren't able to do certain stuff because you have a condition, was was kind of difficult mentally wise. But I ended up learning what my triggers were. I know stress was like a huge part of it, and my doctor will always tell me, stress. I ended up learning what my triggers were and how to either avoid them or get rid of them. And I also realized in college that I've been through a ton of stuff in the short lifespan that I had been through, that I had not talked about or thought about. Because for you to sit up there and say I almost died at the age of 12 because I had double pneumonia, that's a lot for a 19, 20-year-old to deal with, especially when they haven't dealt with it. So I also knew that I needed mental health, because all that stuff eventually started getting dragged back up when I started having crisis attacks. So I did therapy to take care of my mental, still do. I think if I see a doctor for my body, why not for my mind? Your mind is extremely important, just as your body is as a warrior. Then I started talking to my doctor, finding out what are some other things that I can do personally that can help me not have so many crisis attacks? What is it that I can do? Is it there's some other type of medication? And that's when it came about with hydroxyurea. And of course, me, I do my research. I did my research on it and everything. I was like, oh my God, my hair's gonna fall out. That was one of the big like, I don't know if that's worth it. But I did hydroxyurea, folic acid still, and then I don't think people realize sickle cell is also a progressive disease. So as you get older, other things start to pop up. I have neuropathy on the left side of my body. So I ended up having to take medication for that. And then on top of that, I was having chronic pain, not just acute pain, where I will literally wake up every morning and have some sort of pain. And so I eventually had to go on long active pain medicine, which I didn't even know was possible. I was like, oh, okay. So it was also dealing with that too. But those were the methods that I started using. And then as I got older, and I'm not going to say my age, but as I got older, I started figuring out my triggers, knowing what it was. Um, my therapist is a huge help also, making sure I try to eliminate as much stress as possible, which is hard when you work for when you do the type of work I do and have my type of family. That's a little hard to just cut out all the stress. But working with my therapist and knowing my triggers, making sure I take my medication is what's helping, and it's also making me get off that long active pain medicine. So as things progressively get better, I'm getting to the point where I no longer need that. And that just comes with a lot of work.
So kind of like at the moment, a lot of sort of gene editing tools are being used for different treatments, and obviously one of the main ones is kind of gene therapy for kind of sickle cell disease, and that's kind of being going through like different sort of like experiments and stuff like that. What potential do you think these therapies have for patients with sickle cell disease?
I think these therapies have great potential. It could possibly be that cure that most warriors are looking for. Um, it could be, especially if the research comes back and it actually works, where they're taking your own genes and not someone else's genes. So it's not as your body's rejecting it, or you're doing where you have to do the bone marrow transplant. You might run into the risk of having host versus graft disease. It may potentially be better health wise and less complications in the future from it. Um, I think that if this works, it's going to be amazing for the community, because this is a hard condition to live with, just with all the things we have to deal with, not just not just with the disease itself, but outside of the disease. It's a lot to deal with, and this is going to be something, if this is going to be the cure for it, to end all the pain that comes with sickle cell and then the other crap that comes with it too, it's going to be amazing. It's going to be something that will change the community forever.
Yeah, I mean, these kind of experimental therapies, they go through clinical trials, and I think how do you think that researchers and experts can ensure that these studies are kind of ethically aligned with that of the patient, where patients are at the forefront?
Well, what they need to begin with is they need to at least have patients and caregivers at the beginning. Don't come looking for us towards the end when you're doing it. You need us to talk to patients to get them to volunteer to be a part of it. Don't come at that point. You need to have us at the forefront. We have brilliant sickle cell patients that are doctors, bio medical, like just amazing people that have degrees that can work with you guys in the same field, that you can hire, that can help and let you know, like, oh, you know what? I don't really think this is something patients would be interested in, because it's a waste of money if you put millions of dollars into something and you come to the clinical trial and no patient wants to participate in a clinical trial because it's something that they would never do as a patient. Never. That's waste of money. And you can find that out from the beginning if you had a warrior or even a caregiver, a part of that. Just to know, having us a part of it at the beginning instead of the middle or the end when you need us to participate in a clinical trial is a huge part of making sure the clinical trials are a success.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I think having patients at the start, having that voice is so important, because it kind of then dictates the whole of the rest of the kind of pipeline as well. And it's just so important. But what kind of made you want to become like a patient advocate for the disease?
So I think the first time I wanted to be, I was like, you know what, I need to start advocating. I was I was in college. I think it was like my third year. And I started having like really bad crisis attacks. I had a doctor's appointment that Friday. I had it where my classes were set up Monday through Thursday. And then Fridays I would go home and I had my doctor's appointment. Um, couldn't wait that long. Ended up having a crisis attack in my arm, and it was so bad. They actually wrote me with all nurses. So the nurses was like, you need to go to the emergency room. You're in too much pain. Go. Um, went to the emergency room, and this ER doctor, they do everything, give me the IV fluids and everything. And he comes up, he's like, so what's the problem? And I tell him, like, I'm having a crisis attack. I ran out of pain medicine because I don't live down here. But I had a doctor's appointment today and was supposed to get more. He looks at me and said, all you people are alike. And I was just like, I'm like, are you talking about Black people? Because he was white. I was like, are you talking about Black people? Because I'm confused. He's like, no, I'm not talking about Black people. I'm talking about all you sickle cell patients are alike. All you want is drugs. He then proceeds to write a prescription, throw it at me, and say, give her a shot of Dilaudid, and then you could release her. And I was just like, oh my God, I go to Rutgers. I am not seeking drugs. Or it just shocked me. And I was like, now if I'm an educated young Black woman who some people will be like, just looking at her, she just looks sweet. She doesn't look like she probably did anything wrong in her life. They would be wrong. But still, like just looking at her, for you to sit there and accuse me that I'm just seeking drugs and you don't know me, what are you doing to the people or to the warriors that aren't? And
But
that's
it's just annoying, because like people like that shouldn't be in those positions. Like
he's not anymore.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I got him fired. Yeah, he's not. Yeah, I got him fired. Yeah, no, he's not there anymore. But it's horrible. And then I started to pay attention to other things, because I would go and I would see other patients in the ER and stuff. And most sickle cell patients could tell another sickle cell patient from the look. I always say there is no particular look, but when a sickle cell patient is in crisis, we have what they call the sickle cell rock. We tend to rock back and forth, or like side to side. So I would sit there and I would watch the doctors and how they would treat the patients. Like they would treat me completely different, come up, smiles and everything. But I would look at them at another patient, look how they treat another patient, and it was completely different. It was mean, it was degrading, it was just awful. And I was like, that should not be at all. And that's one of the reasons why I was like, you know what? Some people don't have that voice or don't know how to speak up for themselves. I got a loud voice. I can speak up for me and you with none.
What's some of the kind of your like kind of greatest achievements that you have done since you've become a kind of a patient advocate? What's some of the things that you're kind of most proud of that you've like been a part of?
So one of the things I can say that I'm extremely proud of is at my hospital, we got guidelines put in for sickle cell patients for the ER. So when they come into the ER after their triage and they get to the back, it's no longer this 8-10 hour wait and pain. Now they're seen by a doctor within the first 30 minutes. They get their first dose of pain medicine. Next 30 minutes, the doctor comes back and check. They get their next dose of pain medicine. So that's one of the things I am most proud of, because I know some warriors that told me like going to the hospital, going to the ER now is so different as opposed to how it was 10 years ago, because we would be literally sitting in the ER for like 8 hours. Another, I think, accomplishment that I'm proud of is I was part of one of 4 or 5 other CBOs that pushed to get the law passed in 2018 for sickle cell. Um, us ladies, we all worked very hard to make sure that senators account like everything so that the law was passed in 2018. That was also a great achievement for me.
Would you
Well,
be
for
able to,
all of us actually.
would you be able to just give like a little bit more detail about what that actual law is and kind of the
So
efforts that went into
yeah,
it?
so it was S2465, and it's the Sickle Cell Disease and Other Heritable Blood Disorder Research, Surveillance, Prevention, and Treatment Act. And so it pretty much what it was is to it was for research to find out how many sickle cell patients are in the United States, to get more research out, more services out to patients and caregivers, and also to get more funding to local CBOs.
That's really cool. It's really cool that you kind of like have been part of like such a prominent thing. But I mean, the field is like rapidly evolving, and you know everything's changing. What are your hopes for the future um, for sickle cell disease?
My hopes for the future is a lot actually. I'm hoping that we get new therapies. We get more new therapies because I know we've had in the last 3-4 years at least 4 new therapies to hit the market, compared to when the first one that hit was like 20 years prior. So I would love to see new therapies that hit the market. Um, I would really love to see a cure that is going to be universal for all warriors. Um, I would love to see our community come together, and I'm all, because one of the things in the United States that is a huge misconception is that sickle cell is just a Black disease, and it's not. There's Asians, Indians, Caucasians, Blacks, and one of the biggest misconceptions is that I want to see where no warrior is, I'm looking for the right word, no warrior is degraded because of what they have, whether they're white, Black, Indian, or anything. I would like to see that happen. I would like to see a therapy that is going to be universal for all. And I know that's a lot to ask because there's so many different variations of sickle cell disease, it's SST, but that, like all the different ones, but I would like to see, and I may not see it in my generation, but knowing that it's possible for the next generation or the generation after that, I will be so ecstatic. And I just want to see our community come together and just thrive and finally say, you know what? I am not ashamed that I have sickle cell. I wasn't in that bedroom with my parents. I ain't got no say so in it. I got to say so in it now. And I am proud to say that I have sickle cell. And I want it also where these pharmaceutical companies add us at the beginning. Get some of our sickle cell researchers, our scientists, and add them at the beginning so that you know what we as patients want for therapies, and not in the middle or at the end.
Yeah.
I know that's a lot, right?
No, I don't think that's a lot to ask. No, I think it's really good. And kind of, what would you say to someone who's kind of like young and being diagnosed to sickle cell, like, because you've had like a years of experience now, kind of what would you say to them? What would the one message be to them?
Oh wow. I think probably the one message would be you have sickle cell does not have you. And what by that I mean, just because you have sickle cell does not mean you are not able to do anything and everything you want, that you're not able to live a normal, regular life. It's just you're normal. You're able to get married, you're able to have kids, you're able to go to college, you're able to get degrees, you're able to do whatever you want, just knowing your limitations. And make sure, and also to get warrior friends. When I was growing up, I had no warrior friends. I wish I could have talked to someone that had sickle cell when I was growing up to find out, like, hey, If you're just sitting down, can a crisis attack just come out of nowhere when you were just fine 1 minute? I wish I'd have known that. I learned that lesson the hard way. But just having a sickle cell friend that is going to be there and you'll be able to talk to. I have to thank my friend Sakia for it. I call them sickle pals. Yeah, she coined the term. So get a sickle pal because you're going to need that, because although your friends and family can sympathize and empathize with you, they would truly never understand what is going through your mind, but a sickle pal will, because they have experience and they're going through what you're going through. So make sure you have a sickle pal. But yeah, you have sickle cell, don't let it have you.
Thank you so much, Dominique. I mean, your attitude is just so amazing, and I really, really hope that the future that you want happens. So thank you so much for talking to me today.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
Hello everyone, if you enjoyed this video, then make sure you check out some of our other videos in our series by subscribing below or going to our website frontlinegenomics.com. I hope you enjoy.